9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Hi, it's Thursday, and it's a day we talk about politics here on the podcast. And I thought we could use a dose of sanity. So we turned to our friend Jen Rubin of the Washington Post, who's as sane as they come, right? You're as sane as they come, right?
If that's your test, then we are in deep, deep trouble, my friend.
Well, but relatively speaking, compared to our usual guests, you're very sane. We're at a pretty fraught moment, as we always are here in political season, although the stakes seem much, much higher right now. But before we sort of dive in and get to some of the specifics of some of the stories, I'd just like to get your sense of where we are, are you eating and sleeping normally? How are you handling this moment?
I am doing a lot better than I was a couple months ago. Put it that way.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
I think those of us, you and I, are in a small group of people who liked Kamala Harris and thought well of her before she assumed the role.
Yeah, there was a period there where it was just you and I.
I think that's right. So I can't say I'm entirely surprised, but I am somewhat in awe that she has run a campaign really without flaw and has performed so well. The media is now reduced to whining that she doesn't give enough interviews. That's the point of the campaign that we're at. So I think she's running very strongly. It still bothers me for more than one reason that it's as close as it apparently is. But I think she's on a trajectory that, unless something else happens, she's in a good position to win. What I want her to do, though, is to win by a convincing margin, which will diminish Trump's ability to claim it was stolen, cause trouble, put the whole country through another spasm of violence and upset. And also, if she has a good margin of victory, that probably speaks well for the House and the Senate. But we have been down this road before, and we should know that polls within the margin of error are within the margin of error, and stuff does change.
Yeah, although for the past couple of years, when polls are in the margin of error, that means they tend to trend 3, 4, 5 points towards Democrats, better than they have. Now, that wasn't true in 2016, but since Roe v. Wade, because turnout commitment is a big deal. There's a bunch of polls that talk about registered voters. They're useless. There are a bunch of polls that are sort of cooked up to make Donald Trump feel good about himself. They're useless. But when you look at sort of the granular, the nitty-gritty stuff, voter registrations, donations, volunteering, the amount of money that they've got on hand.
Crowd size.
Yes, crowd size. Yes, you and Barack Obama are not giving him any room on that one. But it does seem like the tea leaves paint a better picture than just the polls.
Yeah, and you can tell by the way the candidates are behaving, who is doing well and who's not doing well. Trump is decompensating, decomposing, whatever kind of description you want to use. He still hasn't gotten over the psychic injury of losing to Kamala Harris so badly in the debate. So they are kind of spinning out of control. And they have a fundamental problem, which is the more Americans see of the two candidates, the less they like them. And the more they hear about what they want to do, the less they like them. So what do you do when your candidates are unlikable and their policies are unlikable? You create a fuss about, bizarre other things. And that's the stage that they're kind of at. We do have one debate that, at least for now, is still on the books, and that is Tim Walz and J.D. Vance on October 1st. And what I love about this debate is it's moderated by two women. So I think we have the potential for another really disastrous outing by J.D. Vance, who clearly has spared Sarah Palin, Dan Quayle, and all the other hapless vice presidents the ignominy of being considered the worst vice president in history. He clearly is the worst vice presidential candidate. So I guess I do agree. And I think, there is something to be said about momentum. And if you back away from all the polls for a minute, Kamala Harris is a very likable candidate. And the more people get to know her, the more comfortable they feel, the more they like her. And Trump is just the opposite. So you combine that with, as you say, the enthusiasm factor and the ballot propositions in a number of states that involve abortion that will potentially drive Democrats to the polls. You have a pretty good formula, but we got time to go.
Yeah, 47 days. I don't recall an election where the countdown was so, sort of requisite to every discussion as it is nowadays. But now we have to say 47 days all the time, 46, whatever it is. I think let's go back to the, congratulating ourselves on having been right about Kamala Harris for a second. At every turn in this campaign, Kamala Harris has not only risen to the occasion, met the do or die test, but actually exceeded expectations, and not by a little, by a lot. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, I do think it's fair to ask, it's not that she's likable. It's not that she's not Biden. It's not that she can necessarily, just beat Trump. This is an extraordinary campaign. She is actually, showing herself to be a remarkable talent. And I don't just mean it in the visible ways. So, yes, good speech at the convention, good debate performance. But every time behind the scenes, she had to make a choice about whether or not to keep on some of the Biden staff, about whether or not to let some of them go, about picking Tim Walz, about identifying which policy issues to move up to the front, about identifying how to handle the media, about identifying where to go on the road. She's made excellent decisions. And at a certain point, don't we have to say, wow, maybe she's actually a great candidate?
Yeah, maybe she's really super disciplined, and maybe she works really hard. And maybe she's, as you say, a real talent. I'll point to a couple examples of what you just said. One is she does not dwell on her gender and race. That was purely her call. And when an interviewer, a debate moderator asks her about the latest racist, horrible thing that Trump has said, rather than becoming indignant and angry and kind of repeating the mantra that he's a racist and sexist, she said, same old playbook, move on. And I think that takes incredible discipline and an awareness that she doesn't have to say it. Everybody can see that she's not a white candidate, and everybody can see that Trump is a racist. And by not doing that, she doesn't hit people over the head with it. And she allows, frankly, the more deadly issues to come to the forefront, which is Trump is a miserable human being with scary ideas, and she is a decent, honorable person with very good ideas. And the other thing that I find that is quite, I think, an achievement is that she has chosen to mix progressive policies with open and free market policies, and in a very deliberate way to leave the door open to independents and Republicans. When she talks about incentives for housing developers. That's kind of a Republican playbook sort of thing. She doesn't talk about price controls on food and housing the way she was accused of mulling over. Her foreign policy is right out of the Reagan handbook, and that's why you see so many Republican foreign policy gurus coming out to endorse her. So these are evidence of someone who has thought about these issues, makes good decisions, does not act impulsively, and moreover has kind of a political nose for what it takes to win. And those sorts of talents, coupled with her personal appeal, make her a formidable candidate.
Yeah, just two more points on that. One is, a lot of people are like, well, she's just, Biden plus, and some other people are like, well, she's like Obama. And I have to say, she's not. She's Kamala Harris. She's different. She is much more centrist than Biden is on a lot of things, and willing to be more outspokenly progressive than Biden is on some things. She shows a lot more courage in her approach to things, even the nuance in how she addresses things like Gaza and Palestine, or with which she sort of is willing to grapple with things like corporate price gouging. It's very different, and it's a lot bolder in some respects than we even saw from Obama. I look at all of that, and I also this point that you make, which I agree with, about her not running on her gender, not running on her race, being who she is and letting that speak for itself. And I think, this is somebody who entered the workforce in 1990. She entered the workforce. She has never worked in a Cold War world. That's behind her, right? She grew up, lived her life, worked her career in Silicon Valley, in the heart of the reinvention of the U.S. economy. She's not a Rust Belt person. She's not seeking to restore the manufacturing base. Biden's from a different place in a different era.
Yes. I made that observation. It's Scranton versus Silicon Valley.
And it's difference. I think it is a big difference. And so, and clearly, I've gotten into some very intense Twitter battles with people for pointing out that I think she is, the first post-boomer president. And let me explain why they torture me with this. She was born in October 64. There is a definition that boomers end at the end of 64. The Social Security Administration says boomers end in July of 64. So according to Social Security Administration, she's post-boomer. And then once I got into this, a bunch of people came up and said, oh, no, you're wrong. She's Gen Jones. She's Generation Jones. That's a different... Okay. The point is, she's not like any of the people who came before her.
And she's really not of Trump's generation. And that's what's so apparent. She really is not of the Biden-Trump generation.
Well, I've always been fascinated by the fact that Trump, Clinton, and Bush were all born in the same year, 1946. Biden was born 4 years before that, but they were all born in the same year. And this is a woman who doesn't. She's faced a lot of the pushback that a woman or woman of color faces in the workplace, but it's not the same approach to these problems even that Hillary Clinton had.
Correct. I think there's also one other difference, and someone else pointed it out to me, and it really made sense. She is first generation. Both her parents were born elsewhere. We haven't had a president like that in quite a while, and it makes a difference. The way she talks about America, her love of country, her pride, the line that she states that just makes my heart soar when she says, the greatest privilege in the world is that of being an American citizen. That's how immigrants talk. she is only one generation apart from that. We haven't had that in a very long time. And I think that colors the way she talks about America, the way she talks about an opportunity society. That's a very kind of immigrant perspective on things. And I think that is as important as her age in kind of giving her a different vocabulary, a different reference point than many other candidates, including Biden.
It's interesting. Have there been any other presidents where both their parents were first generation, they were first generation on both sides?
Geez,
Um,
Norm, we now have Norm Ornstein, the perfect person to ask such trivia.
yeah, Norm, you've been involved in campaigns since the late 18th century. Tell me, is this the first candidate who's first generation on both sides?
I think you'd probably have to go back to the founders to find something close to that. But I defer to my elder, and that's you, David.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. This is my cross to bear on this, and this is a lie. I'm going to say it's a lie right here. We don't mince words. Hi, Norm. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm just back from Erie, Pennsylvania, the epicenter of this campaign, and it was very interesting. And I had a little trouble. My microphone and speakers on my computer don't work, so I've had to jerry rig a system, which is why I'm joining you a little bit late. I will say that one of the interesting things in Erie, I was doing something at Gannon University there, and they have Liz Cheney coming in a couple of weeks. They sold out the auditorium. They've had to move it to the convention center. They've got 3,000 people coming, which for Erie is huge. And this is a swing county. It's a Republican congressman. So I felt a little bit better about that. But Pennsylvania is still the key to this election, and it's still way too close to call.
That's very interesting, Norm. I spent the past week in Michigan, and it was interesting because I think there's still some open wounds in Dearborn, Michigan, that are not being healed at the moment. But I think the level of pro-Harris excitement is higher than I've ever seen Democratic excitement.
Yeah.
And so to me, it seems like, at the end of the day, it's going to be about turnout. I'd be interested in whether, both of you have views on that. I mean, go ahead, Norm, since you just dropped in, and then we'll ask Jen.
I do. I think you're exactly right. And the turnout is really two different types of people. It's that Democratic base. And what I'm still worried about there is young people, especially young people of color. But I think we see a high level of excitement. We need to ratchet it up a little bit more. I will say it's interesting. In my talk last night, there were a lot of students there, and a question from an 18-year-old who said, "This is my first vote. Why should I care?" And I went on at length about why this young person should care. That people like me would be affected if Donald Trump wins, but not for all that long. And you've got your whole life to live in a dystopian society without freedoms, with probably little economic help. And we need to make that case over and over. And then we've got something else that was clear in Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's these college-educated, mostly suburban Republicans. And I think we're going to win those, but we need to do more. And I see two issues. Certainly, what we're finding more and more now is what's happened in the aftermath of Dobbs. And I will say that Lawrence O'Donnell last night had just a compelling monologue to start his show about how these states that have introduced laws that say they protect the life of the mother and rape and incest are actually phony, that they have built in ambiguities, and that doctors and other medical professionals who face 10-year jail sentences and the loss of their medical licenses, if any prosecutor questions whether this really was about the life of a mother, And that's why in Georgia, these women have bled to death, 20 hours with sepsis. And we need to emphasize that this is pro death. But the second thing, and we haven't done this enough or seen this enough, I believe, is the gun issue. When the absolutely vile J.D. Vance said school shootings are a fact of life, I want to flood the zone with parents from Sandy Hook and from all these other school shootings saying to the parents and the grandparents with kids in schools, do you really want to live your life where you send your kids or grandkids off to school and not know whether they're going to come back home? Do you want to have them live their lives going to school and the first thing on their minds is, what's my escape plan in case there's an active shooter? And I just think that's going to resonate in ways that will get the turnout moving. And if we combine that with the fact that Trump is only talking about a dystopian America, and Vance even worse, and Harris is talking about freedom and about bringing people together, I think we can get that turnout up where we can win.
What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I agree on both counts. It was interesting. She gave a speech before a Hispanic group in DC yesterday. And when she got to the point about abortion, she, of course, mentioned the ProPublica article, which exposed the deaths there. But she did something else that I thought was really interesting. She said, you know what it's like for a mother, and most people seeking abortions are mothers, they already have children, what it would be like to have to go out of state to have a medical procedure. First, you have to find childcare for your child. You have to take off time from work. Maybe you have sick leave, maybe you don't. You have to get on a plane with total strangers. You have to go to a city that you may not know. You have a medical procedure. You're then bleeding. You probably have to get back on that plane the same day because you have a child care problem and you have to get back to work. You go back on the airplane and you come home. That's what we are putting women through. It's dehumanizing, it's dangerous. And I thought it showed real empathy on her part, because empathy is not just sympathy, it's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And she does that in such a contrast to the vile characters on the Republican side who use people like props, whether it's women, whether it's Haitian immigrants, who are really pathological in their disdain for human life. So, yes, I think you really have, yes, it's democracy, yes, it's two policy choices, but it really is about human decency at some point. And, you know, I haven't talked to her directly a lot, but the few times I've had, she has made that point to me. At some point, it comes down to, are you a decent person or not?
Yeah.
And she really recognizes the people she is running against. And that's a good thing. I think Bush grew up in a different era in which he was willing to excuse Republicans on a whole host of issues. And although he certainly disdains Trump, he's kind of bent over backwards to talk about his Republican friends to a degree I think has been unhelpful and unrealistic. She's under no such confusion. She knows exactly who they are and what she's up against.
Yeah, and that is the one issue, of course, where she does not have to say, I'm a woman running for president. She does not have to say there's a glass ceiling. When a woman talks about that issue, and she is, you know, as it happens, because the administration actually made this choice properly early on, she is the leading spokesperson in the country on the leading issue of the day, and brings to it a perspective that you know only a woman actually can. Norm, let me turn to this other set of issues. Maybe you encountered this in Erie. I certainly encountered it when I was in Michigan and Ohio, and that has to do with these the strategy of the Republicans regarding vilification of immigrants to even higher levels than before. You know, when Trump launched his first campaign in 2015, he started attacking immigrants. When he became president, he went to the Muslim ban. He has said now, that he's going to ratchet that up many, many levels. He started lying about cats and dogs being eaten, and J.D. Vance did too. They were told it's a lie, and they said, it doesn't matter. We don't care. We're going to continue to lie about this. And the Proud Boys showed up in Springfield, Ohio, and they started handing out flyers that were in a kind of German 1930s type font referring to the immigrants as filth, using the same kind of language that Hitler and the Nazis did regarding the Jews. And in the past couple of days, the message from Trump and from Vance is, I'm going to Springfield. I'm going to Aurora. I'm doubling down on this. They're in the home stretch of the campaign, and they seem like their, strategy is to play the hate card, to play the threat of violence card. And I'm just wondering, what's your reaction to that? And do you think we face a greater threat of violence in the next several weeks than we ever have in a home stretch of a presidential campaign?
The answer to the latter question is yes, absolutely, we do. And that's true for a lot of vulnerable communities. I do think with the money that they have, the Harris Walz campaign should be down in South Florida, where there are 400,000 to 500,000 Haitian American voters, but not just focusing on the Haitians. I'd want a theme. First, they came for the Haitians, although, of course, first they came for the Mexican rapists. Then they came for the Muslims. Then they came for the Asians with the China flu. Now they're coming for the Haitians, and who knows who will be next. And I think they're doing this in part because they've got nothing else, David. They at least potential assassination attempt of Trump the other day came on the golf course. Tell me what other presidential candidate with less than 50 days to go in a presidential campaign would be out playing golf instead of going and campaigning. And then he campaigns in New York. He doesn't know what to do. So he falls back on what is the core part of his genetic makeup, which is sociopathy and division. And the fact that he and Vance lie over and over again and put all kinds of people in jeopardy. And let's face it, it's not just the Haitians. It's the school teachers who are facing bomb threats in Springfield. It's the mayor and the city manager. There are all kinds of people. Now, I have to add, Mike DeWine, at least give him not even one cheer, a half a cheer. When all this came up, the governor of Ohio at least said there's no truth to this. He refuses to blame Trump and Vance. No matter what they say or what they do, he blames the internet. And we're going to have Trump going to Springfield. Maybe DeWine will appear with him. I don't know. But the level of cowardice of all these other Republicans plays into the willingness of Trump and Vance to play these vile cards over and over again. And there's another reason, which I will end with, which is it doesn't seem to be costing him a goddamn vote. Why are these elections so close when these guys, because Vance in some ways is even more vile than Trump, although that's hard to do. Why are they playing these cards over and over again? Because there's no sign in any surveys that they're suffering a hemorrhage of the votes from their own base. And they want to rile up that base because, as you said earlier, David, it's about turnout. And if they can get to their magic 47% or even 45% with some of the other candidates in some of these key states, that may be enough to win, even if they lose the popular vote by 10 million.
Jen, I apologize for Norm's language. I know you're not used to this kind of.
Oh, my faint ears.
What's your view on this?
Yeah, I think we don't know that it's not costing him votes. public polling is one thing. Whatever private polling they have is something else. And it may be that they see some erosion, and that's why they're doubling and tripling down. We don't know. This is just pure Trump anyway. But the other way in which it manifests itself is there's some segment of Republicans who may just not show up. They may be quietly disgusted. They're too cowardly to come out and denounce him or to tell their friends that they're opposing him, but they just don't bother voting, or they leave the presidential ticket, blank. And that's also a possibility. And I think what strikes me is, as this is going on, you have multiple groups of prominent Republicans, many in the national security realm, who are coming out not just to condemn Donald Trump, but to affirmatively endorse Kamala Harris in very enthusiastic language, saying she loves this country, she will defend this country. There was just one from a group of Jewish Americans, many Republicans, affirming that she is supportive of Israel. And I think there is some segment of people that appeals to, who just get to the point where they are fed up. Now, I will say this. Where the hell is George W. Bush? What has he got to lose? Why has he been silent? The Cheneys are out there. Even Mike Pence has declared that he wouldn't vote for Trump. What's with George Bush? He's not running for anything. What moral cowardice. What a small, small man. And I think this is one of these character defining moments when you see who is, first of all, so cowardly and so just cringeworthy that they actually support him. The next level of people who say they won't support Donald Trump, but won't say who they're voting for. And then you get to the people who say, what are you talking about? I'm not voting for this person. He's vile. And you know what? She's just fine. And I think the she's just fine contingent has still an upside for her. And I think there will be some Republicans who fancy themselves as Reagan Republicans, whether it's on, the national security or not. It was also interesting. I did a whole piece on it. Scientific American endorsed her. Second time in history they've done such a thing in their 179-year history. And the first time was when Biden was running against Trump, and they also endorsed him. And they went through chapter and verse of how he disdains science, how he disdains the truth, how he operates in manners that are dangerous to people's basic health and security. And I thought it was very powerful because they're an ilk of mostly white men who read that magazine and who follow and think of themselves as engineers, scientists, and that may make a difference. But it got me thinking about something else. There is a surefire sign that you are dealing with an authoritarian fascist, and that is when they introduce junk science, whether it's eugenics, whether it's climate denial. It is because they have to shape facts, they have to recreate the world in order to manipulate people. And that should be a blinking red light for anybody. If you are lying about facts, about science, you are up to no good. And that really kind of drove it home to me. Not just that he lies, but his contempt for the truth, his contempt for the idea that there is truth, and his willingness to sacrifice people's lives and well-being for his own political gain. So that's my favorite endorsement of the political cycle so far. It's early yet, so I'm waiting for Sports Illustrated and Town and Country and the rest of them, but we'll see.
David, just following on one thing that Jen said. My colleague Michael Strain, who's a very good guy at AEI, wrote a piece in National Review about September 17th, 2001, 6 days after 9/11, what I would view as the high point of Bush's presidency. He went to a mosque and he cautioned against people blaming Muslims for what happened on 9/11 and saying this is not a terrible religion. That was an important move. That he now, after everything else that's happened, refuses to step in a way that actually would save the Republican Party that he cares about, does, as Jen said, show a level of either moral indifference or moral cowardice, which is shared by his former national security advisor, Condoleezza Rice. People who, with Rice, I think it's her own ambition. I can't, we can only speculate, but that Republicans now, and this goes for the rest of the Bush family as well, for Jeb as well, that they're staying out of this fight when their party's being taken over by neo-Nazis is just shameful. And history will judge them for this, and it will not judge them well.
Totally true. And by the way, this fight started 9 years ago. So they've had some time.
Yeah.
They have had some time to step into it and to make a choice here. Jen, when we started out, we were talking about the fact that at every juncture, Kamala Harris in this campaign has made the right choice, risen to the occasion. Somehow, at every juncture, Donald Trump has made the wrong choice. And yet he, as Norm points out, is still in the midst of it. And, we're sitting here today, and I will, reveal a little bit to the listener, because they could be listening to it at any point in the next few days, waiting for a story on the North Carolina gubernatorial candidate, Mark Robinson, to break, which is apparently somehow worse than all the stories that already existed about him. And he has a major sex scandal, and he's also suggested that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. So he's not a strong candidate, let's put it that way. But it's as you look at his choices that Trump has made here, you've got J.D. Vance allying to RFK Jr., allying with Elon Musk, bringing Laura Loomer with him on September 11th, even though she is a conspiracy theorist about 9/11, backing Mark Robinson and calling him Martin Luther King on steroids. It's the question, which is the worst one, Jen? I mean, it's really an embarrassment of
It really is.
embarrassment.
And as you say, what did he do? Mark Robinson do? Did he cheat on his wife just after she had given birth with a porn star?
Oh my God.
Commit 34 felonies? Did he steal national security documents? Where is the outrage about the guy at the top of the ticket? I mean, what could this guy, aside from the fact he's losing by 30 points in North Carolina, what could he possibly have done that on a moral scale is as bad as what Trump has done? But that is the world in which we live. And, I've talked to historians about this. I've talked to psychiatrists about this. It was a fascinating poll that PRRI did recently. And they took a survey to determine whether certain individuals are inclined towards authoritarianism, using a very well-regarded screening for that, whether they're Trump supporters and whether they're Republicans, and whether they're evangelical white Americans. And there's a big overlap. It's like this. And that tells us that an entire group of people, maybe as much as 30-40% of America, are inclined towards authoritarianism and are inclined towards this theocratic view of America, that it's some religious haven for white Europeans. And that is a view that is far, far more prevalent than many of us feared. And it's been given air and oxygen and legitimacy by Donald Trump. But it doesn't surprise me at all that all the sleaze is kind of in one place. This is who they attract. This is, who else is going to have them? Who else is Trump going to hang out with? Or this is my latest, disgusting outrage. Sarah Huckabee gets up in a town hall with Trump, and she again criticizes Kamala Harris for not having biological children. First of all, this is outrageous. And secondly, this is a governor who legalized 14-year-olds to work in meatpacking factories. So her concern for children, at least other people's children, is something not to be envied. And it shows you the kind of disgusting individual. Or you look at Senator John Kennedy, who called a Arab American woman a Hamas sympathizer. Not only did he do that, but no other Republican on that panel said anything. This is who they are. They have devolved into a fascist, racist clique, and that's who they are.
Go on, Norm.
If you'll indulge me for a minute, David, a cousin of my brother-in-law had a letter in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune today, and I want to read it to you, just following on what Jen said about Sarah Huckabee Sanders. As I enter my sunset years, I must take responsibility for past actions and past sins. So to J.D. Vance, I am a childless dog man. To Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who recently said her kids keep her humble, but that unfortunately Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble, I clearly have lived a life lacking in humility due to my lack of biological children. So I ask forgiveness. You see, I was unmarried till I was 43. Then I met my now wife, who had been widowed for 6 years. She had 2 daughters. I fell in love with my wife and stepdaughters. My wife and I married, and we became a family. I've always called my stepdaughters my daughters. I thought this was okay because I love them. Now, through the education I've received from 2 real parents, JD and Sarah, I realize I was lying both to myself and my community. Again, I ask forgiveness. I've always called, my daughters are now 39 and 40. They have gifted us with 3 wonderful grandchildren. I love them dearly. So is it okay to call them my grandchildren? Or maybe once childless, always childless, including grandchildren is the rule. I suppose I should write JD and Sarah to find out what the rules are. So he goes on from there, and he says, the truth is finally out. I am the childless dog man of Plymouth, Minnesota. I ask all of your forgiveness. And that to me is so powerful. Satire can work. I did a tweet about Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, if Sarah Huckabee Sanders is raising her children the way Mike Huckabee raised her, call Child Protective Services. What an awful family. What a bunch of grifters. And the only thing missing from her latest diatribe was, where's the lectern that she grifted to get money and broke the law? This is the kind of people who have taken over the Republican Party. And it makes it even more just outrageous and frustrating to those of us who want a responsible 2-party system. We need 2 functional parties, 2 parties that are not filled with malevolent, sociopathic narcissists and grifters. And where are the Bushes and the Rices and the others who have spent their lives as Republicans? Where, for that matter, is Susan Collins? Where is Lisa Murkowski? Where are the people who continue to debase themselves over and over again by just sitting there while this stuff happens? Where is Rob Portman, who's now retired and living a cushy life in Cincinnati, Ohio? Why isn't he speaking up about what's happening in his own state? The level of moral cowardice across the board is frightening, frankly.
It really is. And I, every time that, I talk to you on one of these podcasts, Norm, and of course, Norm is the co-host of our Words Matter podcast. I find it therapeutic. I'm following your Twitter feeds, like following Jen's. It's therapeutic. I don't even have to express my outrage. The number of times that I've read Norm saying, "This is one of the most disgusting people alive. Delete your account."
Yeah.
It really, I get some solace from it.
By the way, it is so weird, this thing about blended children and stepchildren. It makes no sense. They're against abortion. So now they're against people other than the biological parent raising children. What do they want? And it just shows you how malevolent they are, how stupidly mean spirited they are. And you're talking about, the top of the ticket who has been married 3 times.
Oh, don't forget Melania's book coming out
Yes,
because
yes.
this is a real. I mean, I'd be interested in your reactions to this, but this is a kind of interesting campaign strategy where she's leading with her defense of posing nude in sort of softcore pictures for her new book to come out weeks before the campaign. What, I mean, seriously, what's going on here?
When she's, I guess, not going to do like book tours because she doesn't talk to the press, or maybe she'll do that. She just doesn't show up at campaign events or do anything there. They are so weird and so gross. And those 2 male children, I mean, my God, what disgusting characters, and what an advertisement for 100% estate tax is he and those progeny. Useless people grifting along with their father, engaged in the same most malevolent, mean-spirited, awful rhetoric. You just want to take a shower every time you have to listen to these people, and
But
it is very disturbing that most Americans kind of think, well, it's just politics, or not most, but many Americans think, well, it's just politics. They're bad. Democrats are bad.
well, if you do the math, Norm, and you see the things that they accept seemingly hypocritically: treason, trafficking in stolen documents, felonies, rape, racism, dereliction of duty, inexperience, idiocy, porn, all this kind of stuff. There's only one thing that remains that seems to be the uniting principle behind the MAGA movement, and that's support for white Christian men. And that if you're a white Christian male, you can do anything, and if you are anything else, you're bad news. And that sounds pretty stark, but that's the way the math works out, isn't it?
It certainly is. And, even putting Trump aside, there's a congressman from Tennessee named Scott Delargey. He is a physician, I believe. He had a mistress and forced 2 abortions on her. One on his wife, is, of course, pro-life. All of this comes out. He gets reelected over and over again. What they all know is that they can do and say anything they want and get away with it. And that's the world we live in now. And, another part of this, and I'll return to another hobby horse of mine. So in the last few days, beyond all the vile stuff that he said about Haitians and others, Donald Trump was asked a question about what's the biggest threat facing the automobile industry, and he said nuclear war. Donald Trump was asked what to do about food prices, to bring food prices down, and he said, have larger tariffs on imported food. So you raise prices so you can get prices down. Donald Trump referred to the oil fields in Alaska as Bagram, the air base in Afghanistan. If Joe Biden had made any one of these, we would have seen every press outlet in America go to DEFCON 1, and they just go right past us, because so much of what Trump says and what Trump does gets integrated into, that's just who he is. So the sense of threat that people would feel about this, the fact that he has talked about the violent Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and other thugs from January 6th as hostages, and has said he will pardon them, where we know what he'll do is to create his own vigilante army to go out and murder people or intimidate people. and it just floats right past the press. That's part of the reason we're in the dilemma that we're in right now, a good part of it.
No
Absolutely.
question.
I have never thought the press has been as bad as they are at this moment.
Yeah.
They were bad when Hillary was running. The butt emails was bad, but that was before we knew exactly what Trump would do with power. That was before January 6th. That was before he stole national secrets. That was before he was convicted on criminal counts. They are so wedded to this fake kind of neutrality, which only empowers, only emboldens him. That plus the desire for constant clicks, which is why they have been so negative on the economy and convinced most Americans that the economy is terrible. That plus their fiendish search for some conservative niche group that they think is actually going to pay attention to them, good luck with that, has driven them to become liars. And that's the only way you can describe it. If you something is going on before your eyes and he's unhinged, he's ranting, he's incoherent, and your headline says Trump made the argument today, that's a lie. That's dishonest. And as much as we complain about it, it just doesn't seem to make a difference. And I think it's shameful. I think we need a new kind of journalism. And I think I would hope there would be some self reflection after this. I guarantee there won't be because they are incredibly defensive, incredibly condescending, and they take this attitude that, well, if both sides are criticizing us, we must be doing a good job.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, it's a crazy time, and I wouldn't be able to make it through without you guys. I think you are the very, very best. I enjoyed talking to you. I want to send out our congratulations to Josh Stein, the next governor of North Carolina. Um, I was gonna. We don't have time, but I was gonna ask a question. Which of his mistakes will Trump end up regretting the most? But
JD Vance.
it could be JD Vance, but it could be Mark Robinson. Because if he loses North Carolina, say goodnight. So it's an interesting moment. We will follow it closely. Hopefully, we will talk to you again before this election is over. But until then, follow Jen at her column and at her own podcast. Follow Norm at his podcast, and follow us here at the DSR Network. Until you join us next. Bye bye.